Hello. Hello and welcome to another episode of That Recording Podcast, conversations on the philosophy behind recording with a range of guests from across the recording world. I'm your host, Joe Montague. Okay, so this is the last episode of this season, second half of my conversation with Spencer Tweedy, and I just want to thank you all again for coming back to listen. You know, it was a fairly long break I took, and this is nice to be back with a season. It feels really great to be back at it again, and I'm so excited for the guests that I've got coming up next season. I'm not quite sure when that will be coming, maybe May, sort of June time, by the time I've managed to get all of those interviews done, because I'd like to do quite a lot of them in person, but half of them are booked in. I've had some done already, so well on the way with that. And just a reminder that you can go to, if you would, please go to Instagram and type in That Recording Podcast and give us a follow. I've set up a whole new account that's separate from my personal one, so that I can keep the podcast over there. Obviously, it's linked with what I do, but I wanted to make it a fully separate thing. So please do go and do that. On there, you can see highlights from previous episodes. In the off-season, I'm going to do some from the very first time I did this. I did about 100 or so episodes before this season with a whole load of guests, so I'm going to be sharing some of my favourite moments from that. And each guest from this season and for the next seasons, there's a beautiful painting that's been done by my friend Adam, who's amazing, and I wanted to keep that kind of analog feel running through even just the promo of this. I love the idea of each episode being really unique and each guest having one of these pictures done by Adam. I just thought that was a really lovely idea, so wanted to continue that through. So yeah, please do go and do that. You can also find me if you'd like to. My name is Joe Montague, and I should have said that at the beginning. I think I did say that at the beginning. My name is Joe Montague. If you type in Joe Montague Drums on Instagram, you will find me and the drum sessions and all that kind of stuff that I do. You can also find me at joemontaguedrums.com, I think. I'm actually just going to double check. Yeah, .com. There we go. Look, international. So yeah, please do feel free to go and do that. And feel free to get in contact with me if you've got guest suggestions. If you just want to say, hey, I'm just at the end of an email. I'm a human being. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about doing this the first time round, was just the sort of community that got built. We're hoping now that with these seasons it's all a little bit more manageable, as you've seen in the press with some higher profile people who run big podcasts. It's stressful getting something up and running every week, but this time it's been a lot more manageable. It seems to be doing it a lot better, and I think the season's approach works well. It gives me a bit of breathing space to find guests that I really want to speak to. Oh yes, and one final thing, I'm sorry, this is the last thing from me. If you wouldn't mind going to Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast and leaving it a review, that would be really helpful. It just sort of pushes it up ratings and helps it get shared with other people. There's quite a few on there already, but it would be lovely if you wouldn't mind doing that, especially if you're new to the podcast. I would really appreciate it. Okay, enjoy this last episode, and I will speak to you in June, if not before. That Recording Podcast is sponsored by Make Noise Pro Audio, the trusted source for new and used audio equipment. They also do repairs, so are a veritable trifecta of audio accomplishment. I've been buying from Make Noise for years. They are a fantastic company with impeccable customer service. Go and check them out online at makenoiseproaudio.co.uk, and they're also on Instagram, where new gear is posted up pretty much daily. Go and do it. Do it now. In fact, do it after the podcast. On with the show! I'm kind of curious about what you learned and absorbed from kind of like Tom Schick and your dad, and being involved in the workflow, and kind of what you think what best practices and kind of positive practices you've taken away that work for the way that you approach making music and working with other people on music. You know, obviously they're like, Tom Schick's incredible, and the work, you know, how to have access to observe people like that. There, you know, I can remember a few occasions when I've got to work with you know, incredibly high end kind of engineers and producers, and just want to soak up every ounce of information from them. And so what was that like for you, and what did you take? You know, what are the kind of headline things that you're aware of that you've taken into your workflow?
Oh my God, that's such a huge thing. That's like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because such an insane privilege to get to watch Tom Schick engineer and to watch my dad make production choices. The first thing that comes to mind is sort of the principle of cleaning as you go, doing the work now, almost every time, almost in every circumstance, not creating a whole bunch of dirty dishes to do later. This isn't something that Tom talks about, but it's just something I see. He's like he's comping in the moment, comping takes, cleaning up things in the moment. You gotta have partners or an artist who's, comfortable with that sort of time commitment. And Tom is very, very fast. These aren't even things that really slow us down or get us lost in the computer or something. But yeah, just having like the willpower to kind of make those energy intensive choices and do those tedious things like cleaning up fades and clips and whatnot in the moment is such a huge thing. And Tom has like such impeccable diligence about that, probably from his time, cutting his teeth at Sear Sound in New York.
Yeah, it feels like a sort of really quite a professional and learned skill. It's that kind of, I love the idea of these big professional studios and people going through the ropes, starting as tape ops and kind of working their way through it. And that feels like a trope of those sorts of things. Yeah,
do it now. Exactly. He has put a lot of work in, and so maybe work isn't so daunting in the present day. And the second thing that comes to mind on the production end from my dad and from Tom, and they share a lot of, they're like trusted confidants for each other and make a lot of choices together, is just kind of developing a sense of like, minimalism isn't the right word, but just like a sense of what's gonna work and what's not. And obviously you still want to take chances on an idea for a part and or like an additional instrument or something, but just sort of like, I don't know, there's a you sort of grow to know what songs need and how to manage the energy flow over the course of a song, and that I feel like my dad is really good at. And it's not like conventional, so to speak, and obviously you don't want to be tied down by convention, but there is sort of like a craft or like a tradition to a lot of the ways you're like, that we really need something here. This feels like you need something here, and that in there's convention in that sense, and just being able to grow an awareness of those conventions and how to kind of solve those problems or give a song what it needs based on those feelings from watching my dad is a huge privilege.
I suppose that the conventions are come from listening and having experience, of knowing what is possible through listening to what other people have done, but then also having an awareness of a degree of listening awareness when you're listening back to what's coming and being like, this doesn't feel right, because you're so invested in you're able to attach or kind of empathize with what's coming out the speakers so well that I've got this feeling that this next bit needs to happen, and that's an incredibly tough thing. And I think that when you're reading about I suppose that's a learned skill and a one that comes innately, but it's a tough one to kind of to gather. And I think where I was going with that is kind of like when I'm, obviously read both of your dad's books, and one of the things he talks about is that kind of like trusting what's coming down the line, and like having enough faith in what's coming, but not actually knowing necessarily strictly what that is. And that is so difficult to kind of to put into words, but it's kind of like every song is different, isn't it? And every situation is different. So you don't know, you can't go, well, this needs a bridge because it doesn't have one. It's like, well, I'm listening. Do I feel like it wants to move to a bridge? And that's why every song is like a logic puzzle that needs unpicking. And you're finding the heart of what the song's about and what the sound, the soundscape that you're creating, and kind of using your ears. I suppose trying to reword what you've said of kind of sitting and listening to it and watching these guys unpick what needs to happen and listen, and then you can, it's a really tough skill to learn. It's I don't think I've learned it yet, but I've certainly got an awareness of it, and it's, whether we ever learn it fully or whether we're terrified by the prospect of doing it every time we do it, and and hopefully hope it comes good. Who knows?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like this this kind of ever-present tension between vision and reaction. Like, you do end up with ideas. You can hear a sound. You can hear a sound before you make it. Sometimes you can hear maybe a whole arrangement, or what's I think most exciting is like when accidents or some things about the way that a track has started to come together kind of create the phantom sound of something else that you can hear on the track or that you want to hear on the track. And so in all those cases, you end up with a target in mind, a sound you can sort of imagine and want to realize. And I think the idea is like not becoming so rigidly attached to those imaginings that you stop responding to what's available and what's happening. That's a really abstract way of putting it, but
no, I enjoyed that. I got that.
It's a major thing that I learned from my dad, because in my own recording experiments and first experiences recording, I definitely found myself on the side of like, okay, I have the whole arrangement in my head, and now I'm gonna do it. And that can be okay, and sometimes you can even sort of do it. Like, it's very hard, as anyone who's recorded knows, it's like very hard to match what you imagine, hardly at all. It's like reality is so tough, especially when you're just starting out like I was or whatever, and not a super well-trained engineer.
I think Steely Dan are a great example of that. I mean, they're probably the most famous example of people chasing the perfection that they had in their mind's eye.
Yeah, exactly. And again, sometimes it can create really wonderful results. But my dad's approach is definitely like, usually not starting with that whole thing, the whole arrangement. And in any case, even if you are, it's like the only thing that you're going to be allowed to have is what you have, and just giving yourself the acceptance of following a new path instead of forcing the other way it's just so much more pleasurable, and also it's like, I feel like sometimes, I'll just speak for myself, you can feel like that's that to do so is to lack integrity, because it's like, oh, you're not sticking by what you thought it could sound like, or what you wanted it to sound like. I don't think that's the case at all. It's like it's completely honest to be like, here's where we're going. Here's a new door that opened, and so you're going to go through it. That's
such an incredibly important idea, and I think so often things like egos get in the way of that. And it's so to be sort of fully open to the possibility of exploring new doors is it's not easy to do often, depending on the circumstances of where that is. And even in the moment, it's quite hard to do. So again, I think it's a skill that is learned. That when something all the best plans fail, and you have to adapt the plan constantly. It doesn't matter whether it's music or business or whatever it is. It's, you can have a plan. It's important to have a plan, but almost as soon as you've written the plan is failing. It's moving. It's failing is a horrid word for it, but it's moving constantly. Yeah. To have the humility to allow a song, or it isn't even necessarily humility. It's just lack of ego attached to anything, and allow that song to move. But then I have this theory that music is this holding of two contradictory ideas constantly, and that seems to come up in my mind, at least, all the time. And this is reminding me of it, that on the one hand you've got the sort of lack of ego that allows the song to move around, but then on the other hand you've got the confidence to know that that's an okay thing, and that you're not lacking integrity by choosing a different path.
Totally. And even no matter how many times you contemplate this, or what we're discussing, like being open, a lot of this probably comes off as pretty straightforward to a listener, or maybe we may even be verging on the cliche. But the thing is, it's like no matter how many times you encounter these ideas, it can still be hard in the moment to live by it. And I think an equivalent in writing is like the aphorism of "kill your darlings," meaning like don't hold on to a phrase or a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter just because you feel so clever. And the same, that's kind of what we're talking about. And sure, that's such a common teaching that there's even just that shorthand, kill your darlings about it. But cliche or not, it's like it's still somehow difficult every time it comes up to identify if that's what's going on, and to have the strength to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly one thing talking about these things and another thing acting upon it, for sure.
Yeah,
I've got so much that I want to ask you. I'm trying to get through things as neatly as I can. I mean,
I'm so long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. I mean, the funny thing is that I am too. So often when I meet my match on these podcasts, when I'm kind of find somebody who wants to talk as much as I do. One of the things that I've noticed about your playing, which I really love, is you seem to follow the rhythm of the acoustic a lot, and that's something that I suppose, like, I get sent occasionally. I'll be sent an acoustic guitar and a vocal, and it will be, I don't know where this song is going to go. Would you do some drums for it? And in one sense of that, that's the scariest thing I could get sent, because you're kind of like, well, where do you want this to go? Have you got any ideas? But then on the other, in the other sense, I love it, because I'm kind of like, right, well, I've got to listen deeply into what's going on the acoustic guitar, and listen to the rhythm of what the right hand's doing, and where the changes are happening, and where the melody's going, and you're not confused by, or you're not sort of convoluted by a bass line that's playing a simple rhythm or anything like that. It's just, you've just got melody and accompaniment to go with, and I hear that so deeply in your playing that you're not. Obviously, there are exceptions to this where it's not appropriate to do so, but so often you're listening out to what the melody is doing and what I suppose the core accompaniment is doing, and I think that's a special thing in your playing that's not as common as I think it should be, really. And I just want, how do you think about your approach to working on a song? Like, what are you listening for, and what are your thoughts on that idea of following melody and sort of core accompaniment?
Well, thank you, first of all. It's really, really kind. Really appreciate that. I mean, the truth is, it was not on purpose. It's not something that I decided, it's not an approach that I decided upon. I think it really does come out of playing so much with growing up with my dad playing acoustic guitar But yeah, I guess it happens because if you're listening and you're feeling a song, there's so much inside of acoustic guitars. The sound of an acoustic guitar and the way that people strumming acoustic guitars articulate it. It'll just get in you if you're listening to it. And there's nuance in the rhythm, how they're articulating. There's strumming. There's nuance in the overtones, the melody. And oftentimes the melody is in the chord progression that they're strumming, not just in the vocal. And I definitely wouldn't, this is not something that I would encourage people to, I don't know why I'm deciding to give advice all of a sudden, but it's not something I would encourage people to do too consciously, because I think then that would be a little, might sound a little laborious, but I think the idea is like, let acoustic guitar parts wash over you. Sing. It actually also really just comes from singing. I think everyone playing every single instrument has to sing the song. If there's no vocal, or even if it's instrumental, like sing the chords to yourself. Like, that is the song. That is the song. And so I feel like just playing that and just like playing that on the drums is the most fun thing to do. That's like the most fun thing in the world. So yeah, I don't know. It's just it's all there for the taking, or for the absorbing, I guess.
Yeah. I think, like you say, it communicates so much, and I guess it allows you to come up with interesting ways of playing, or coming up with parts that mean that they're potentially not conventional, and the sound of them, it's not like coming up with those parts, it's a particularly like defiant creative act of like, I'm going to come up with something that's unconventional. It's just like, well, this is the thing that fits, because this goes along with what, whether it's acoustic or piano or whatever, whatever the rhythm of what's going on, this is the thing that works. It's the bit that fits in the song. And as you say, if you're listening, it is kind of intently enough, but also if you're just listening to what the song is, like a broader sense of it, then that informs what you're going to play, and that's where it fits quite nicely. And it gets like this unified band feeling. A lot of the tracks that you've played on have got that kind of team. It feels like a team effort rather than a drum and bass accompaniment with a song on the top of it. It's like it brings everything together to make this. I'll tell you what's ringing in my head. I played on an album recently that was. It's completely insane. It was fully AI. Like, it's a 60s thing. Yeah, it's madness.
Yeah.
So sounds when I first got it sent to me, it was really, really 60s sounding, and I was kind of like, wow, this guy's gone really deep into 60s sounds. And then he told me that it was fully AI, and my jaw hit the floor. I didn't even know how to genuinely, my heart was racing fast. I kind of like, I don't know how to respond to this. This is my first.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like my first sort of confrontation with actual full AI. I didn't really know what to do.
And it was convincing.
It was on the surface, and then when you dug down into it, and this is what is relevant to this conversation, what it's done is that it's listened to 60s music, and it's listened so purely on a sound basis, and it's kind of gone, what does it sound like? So I think it's been able to separate a vocal and the band, like the rest of the music. But it's not thinking in terms of there's drums, there's bass, there's organ or keys, and there's guitar, and there's horns. It's just thinking of a sound. So as the song went along, different bits popped out. So there might be a tom fill, sort of quintessential tom fill that came out, and then it would turn back into just generic 60s sound. So you can't hear the tom pattern in the rest of the song. You just hear it poke out for that one bar, and then it dips back down into it. And I feel like that reminds me of kind of this sort of team attitude towards making music of every, if we're all working at the top line of this is what the song is, and the bit that people can hear is the song, and the accompanying sort of rhythm that goes along with the melody is an extension of the melody because it kind of fits in and around it, and then we're all contributing to that and sort of allowing ourselves to rise to the surface of what that is when appropriate, when a drum fill happens, for example, leading into another section, or you know, but the rest of the time we're just sitting in our place supporting what's going on and letting other people be the thing that's at the top. So just a curious way of thinking about that.
100%. But do you ever think about how I'm playing in a show this month and we're covering a Ventures song, and do you ever think about how sounds of certain styles, sounds of certain periods, time periods, are the result of partly the result of absolute novices making poor decisions? Like you had mentioned that the AI tool was just inserted a tom fill that was not terribly connected to the rest of the song, and when you said that, I was like, oh, well, that sounds like the garage bands of 1963 or 1966 that I'm listening to right now, or we hear our whole lives, and then it's over time in these layers of history and layers of homage and blah 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 blah. Now to me it sounds normal, it sounds right, it sounds of a piece with the tradition. But I'm just curious what you think about that. That sounds kind of similar to the AI making a kind of disconnected choice.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's interesting, the idea that it wouldn't have been maybe what was deemed now as the correct musical choice. But I think that there's an innate. I love 60s garage rock, and I love it for exactly the reasons that you've just described. That it's these, it's not, goes without saying that I absolutely love Ringo. And one of the things that I think he does the best is this sort of almost naive approach to, well, there's a space there and I'm going to do something in it. And he's not, I feel as though he's not even aware that that's what's going on. It's just, it's just doing, with a kind of naive confidence, and that's what those 60s bands are doing. They're just making. No one's making calculated decisions on, oh, well, there's a gap there, so there should be a tom fill, and it's got to match the melody, and it's got to do this. It's just I'm gonna do it, and this is what I've done. And that's
I'm gonna
exciting.
Go like
this. Yeah, exactly. That's it. And that, I think, particularly in the way that I try to work from a distance with a lot of people, is I want to shoehorn in the loveliest way, not in a kind of negative way, those ideas in. I want to try and yes, I might be 1,000 miles from whoever I'm working with, but I like the idea of trying to channel that kind of innocence in what I'm doing, and try and forget all of your playing certainly sounds like you've studied. I know you said you're self-taught, but you've listened to a lot of drummers, and you clearly have a good understanding of the sort of history of the instrument and all that kind of stuff. So trying to forget all of that and just respond like I'm in that garage 60s rock band, just going what would sort of 16-year-old me want to do in this gap? And why don't I just do it and see what happens? And sometimes it's the right, more often than not, it's the right thing. And it's kind of
so we
special.
feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, so special.
I think that's what it's hard to get that. It's hard to learn that because it involves that kind of funny oxymoron of having enough sort of naivety in a musical situation and humility, but also enough confidence to put those ideas forward. Because whoever you're in the studio with working or whatever, it may not be as receptive to that, and it's okay for that to happen, and you go, okay, well, you know, I tried it, and let's stick with what you thought. You know, if they're going to push it to, you know, that much. But I feel like certainly the music that I've heard that you've been involved with, you've been quite, you've been surrounded by musicians who are open to you know, receptive to kind of lovely ideas like that.
Yeah, thank God. I mean, like, I really feel so extremely lucky about that because, oh man, I mean, it's the only way I want to do it. And yeah, just ending up in circumstances where people, because like you say, not everyone wants that, and sometimes it can be like punished, you know, but ending up in circumstances where people, that's actually like why they're calling you, you know, that's like, that's an extremely lucky circumstance. No.
You can hear it, you know, you can hear it in, you know, like when I said right at the beginning, when you put that Waxahatchee record on, Tiger's Blood, and you kind of like that, I can hear straight away, these are my people, you know, suddenly feel like an affinity with what's going on, because the whole record smacks of maturity in musical decision making, but in the irony being that it's maturity but also entirely innocent all at the same time, and you can feel that kind of sense of what that is straight away. And that's the same with you know, it's the same with Suki Ray, it's the same with all the Mavis Staples stuff. All of that decision making is involved, and the Plains stuff, you know, you just I don't know, it's like through the headphones you can sense that specialness.
It is kind of funny because it's like I agree with you, and I hear what you're talking about, and like I feel a certain feeling of pride about that innocence or whatever that we achieved as an ensemble, like as a band, as an ensemble, making all those songs together, not just me. But it is also kind of funny talking about it or acknowledging it, because it's like there's a certain amount of like, I guess we're delusional, or I'm delusional, in that in the moment it feels like nothing but normal. It feels like nothing but normal. It's like, oh no, we are trying to be professional. Like, we are trying to be top notch. And I know you didn't say it's not, but but then like coming back to it afterward and being like, oh, that's not like what that's not what the textbook said. That being surprised by that is just kind of funny. I don't know, that I have an analogy on the tip of my tongue, but it's not coming to me. It's just like, I don't know, it's like a guy who steps up to bat with a baseball bat, and this actually happened to me when I was a kid. I was absolutely horrible at baseball, but I swung a bat, and then in the same motion of the swing, pivoted around on my leg to then bat with the other, you know, started righty and then swung around to swing the next pitch lefty, which is not something you do, but I was kind of partly ambidextrous, and the entire crowd of parents, you know, it was probably like 20 parents or something, and the coaches laughed at me, and of course I was a little kid, so I was very upset. Laughed at me because it's not normal, but in my mind in that moment, that was perfectly normal. And I think that's, you know, part of what we're talking about is like cultivating the obliviousness that allows you to feel like it's normal. That's what allows you to play naively or play innocently or without too much thought, without too much thinking.
Love it. Cultivating obliviousness that's a phrase that I quite like. There's a couple more things that I want to get to.
Sure,
I want to make sure that we do talk about. I mean, obviously, I want to talk about Mirror Sound. Like, what an incredible book! Like, that's.
Oh, thanks.
It's, I mean, it just was again like completely blown away when you find something that you're just like, this is a load of people making music in a way that's similar to how I think about it. And I mean, where did so like it's essentially you visiting, and this is for anybody that doesn't have it, it's essentially you visiting artists' unique studio spaces and places where they create, and kind of talking through their philosophy on making and why that space works for them, accompanied with incredible photos of what those spaces look like. I mean, what was the kind of driving force? Where was the germ of the idea of why you felt like this book needed to happen?
The germ of the idea was all the way back in high school for me. Getting super into self-recording, getting super into Paul McCartney, solo records.
Yeah.
Tame Impala, all these people who were kind of Emmett Rhodes, people who kind of typify the practice of recording yourself. Getting super into that and feeling like there's a specific sound that comes from records where one person made it all more or less by themselves. And then on top of that, feeling like, okay, like I want a creative project that has to do with this, and that maybe isn't making a record right now. Love writing. I have, been writing since I was a teenager. Honestly, kind of working from making music, like in a way that I'm a little bit ashamed of. Working on the book became, in a way, sort of like, it was like easier than confronting the difficulty of recording more of my own songs or something. So it was like a distraction project. But yeah, really all coming from a deep love for records that are made that way.
How did you decide who you wanted to include? There's obviously, I mean, like guys like Emmett Rhodes is, godfather of that style of making music. So he, but then how did you decide who else to include in the book?
A lot of people that I've encountered just from touring or from like mutual friends, from obviously meeting people thanks to my dad and thanks to being around Wilco. But then also people that we considered who I hadn't ever met before, because we wanted to, like, it broadened the perspectives in the book, not just have only white guys, not that that's the only people I knew, but like keeping an eye toward like just a range of backgrounds and approaches.
Yeah, I understand. Did you find there was a common thread between everyone? Obviously the whole book is threaded together through the interviews and your writing, but was there anything that sort of jumps out as like a common theme or a common way of looking at it that they all had in common despite being from different musical backgrounds?
The most commonly recurring idea that people mentioned was no clock ticking. That was the number one thing, people being like, I just love not worrying about paid studio time, not worrying about that I'm wasting the studio day rate by working on a certain idea, exploring a certain idea that might not pan out, or wasting the time of my collaborators, blah blah blah. Being able to just fully explore something with that without any concern for that was like the most common thing people brought up.
I think it's maybe there's two different types of records in a sense, and there's those ones that where it's already written and you then go in to document it, and then there's ones like McCartney 1 and McCartney 2 and Emmett Road stuff where it's documented alongside being created, and there's not having that time on the clock allows you to make one of those records.
Truly, yeah, that's basically what people were saying. And I don't know, I think there's something to be said about a clock ticking sometimes. There's something to be said about putting a little bit of pressure on. And people know that. And there's something to be said too about growing more comfortable with tuning out the sound of the clock when it really exists. That's being able to do the vocal take while other people are in the room and pretending like you're tapping into the feeling you have when you're completely alone and like feel like you're just in yourself, in your own feelings, all those things. I think there's something to be said for it, but yeah, it tends to be easier to make a McCartney 1 when you're in your own house. And I mean, of course, Paul could have paid for unlimited clocks ticking in studios, but that's another story.
I think a really kind of sort of surface level observation, which was quite nice looking through it, is the amount of things that you see people who make amazing music using that you go, I've got that, and that's not a piece of gear I'd have expected to see in that person's space. And that, I think that's I've heard you talking about it in other interviews that you've done, and I think it's almost an urban myth that social media has created, that we need specific types of gear to do certain things, and that just isn't the case. And if you're confident with the sound that you're chasing, and can confidently use your ears to kind of quality check the sound that you're making and make sure that it's either a choice to be lo-fi or it's hi-fi or whatever, that it doesn't matter what tools are being used, it doesn't matter what particular brand of pre or compressor or EQ or whatever that you have, it's just that sounds good and that's the one that I have, so I'm using it. Now that was nice to see, kind of people who've been backed up by catalogs of positive creative music using gear that is completely accessible to everybody.
If there's one thing that we hope people take away from the book, it's that feeling exactly. It's just like that it is possible with whatever tools are around. It might not be exactly the record that you want to make sometime down the road. Maybe sometime down the road you really do really want the sound of a Neumann 47, and maybe one day you'll make that happen. But in the meantime, it's like so much is possible with very accessible things, and it's worth using them, and hopefully someone feels encouraged to use them.
Yeah, I think that's quite an inspiring, immediacy, like immediate takeaway from the book that people can kind of pick up and realize straight away that, these people are just like you and me, and we can all, we can all just do this. We don't have to spend tens of thousands on, on these things. I talking from my own frame of reference in the sense, my studio space is a very quirky spot, and for a good few years I've kind of almost sought to hide the fact that it was a bit quirky, and it's only been in the last sort of 4 or 5 years that, when people arrive and they're like, oh, this is so cool, and you're like, oh, wait a second, so the cool thing about this is the mere fact that it is quirky. And it's nice to kind of embrace that, and to see other people with their own unique set of circumstances that they've got to kind of deal with or put up with or whatever, and that, like, they're able to make music including those quirks.
Yeah, like Leticia Temko, who records as Vagabond and who's interviewed in the book, she got her first keyboard and audio interface literally out of the trash on someone's curb in New York City. So there you go. Yeah,
exactly. It's accessible to all of us. The final thing that I want to talk about is your Substack and the writings. I mean, I didn't even know Substack existed until about 6 months ago. And I can't remember. I think it might have even been when I was looking you up that were kind of, it linked straight to Substack. And I was like, oh, hold on. What's Substack? And then I found out about it. It was like, this is a cool place. I like it.
Yeah.
And I love, so like you write, I don't even like the kind of article, essay, like diary entry sort of things, like a big mixture of stuff. And you mentioned in your kind of intro to when you started the Substack, which is what was it, just over a year ago, specifically just on Substack. I mean, you've obviously been writing a lot longer.
Like coming up on 2 years, yeah.
Okay, so then I know it was 2023, but I didn't know whenabouts. But then you talk about how you took a break from writing sort of long form. Your observations were often short form, and then you took a break from writing long form, and you mentioned there's a link to your dad's book, How to Write One Song, and how that maybe conversations with him had inspired you to get back to writing. And I think there's I'm hoping there's a sort of a creative discussion around this, not necessarily the fact that it's writing and, you know, people who are listening to this are not all writers, but, you know, it's more just a comment on creativity in general. What was it that helped you overcome whatever it is that you wanted to overcome in order to begin writing again and be fruitful in that area?
Just, I guess I just kind of feel an itch to do it, and it felt weird for a while, still feels weird, still kind of navigating the strangeness of writing about one's life and like feeling like it's not that it's like, who cares, who's gonna care about this, and also feeling like a desire to have privacy. I don't know, it was just like, you know, I think the truth is there's a certain amount of superficiality involved, because in 2023 email newsletters, and in the years around then, email newsletters were really like having a resurgence as like a thing, as a cultural thing that people do. And I, you know, on one hand, that it feels really superficial to get on a trend like that and to feel more comfortable with the creative medium just because a bunch of other people are doing it again. But but thinking about it right now, because of your question, I guess it occurs to me that like there's something very real about other people saying like, this is normal, or this is fun, and like, we're not going to make fun of you for doing this because we do it too. Like, you know, that's sort of like maybe the unspoken sense you get from a broad global like happening of like, oh, this is a medium that we're all like kind of interested in the moment. So I think it had partly to do with that, but I don't know. First, I can't totally put my finger on why it felt comfortable again, and it's really ebbs and flows, because I've tried to keep it going. I do keep it going somewhat regularly, but I still have to find a way in every time of like, what am I going to say that isn't just like, I ate a sandwich today, and then I did this, and then I did this, and I'm playing these shows, and, you know, it's only fun for me if I can figure out some, like with songwriting or a drum part or anything, it's like only being worthwhile if it's something you want to consume too, you want to listen to too. That's the challenge, and sometimes it's harder than other times. But yeah, since getting back into that type of writing, just like trying to figure out it's just been a process of trying to figure out a way to make it feel worthwhile continuously.
Do you think that so you're talking about it being worthwhile for something for you to listen to, or like not just write about like the surface level sort of encounters that you've had, that it actually forces you to focus a bit deeper on like what are you really thinking about? And that's one of the nice things about, you know, whether it's writing or making anything creative, in order for it to have meaning and like it's sort of an integrity about it, you have to look in more like deeper than you would have done had you just been like, yeah, this is we were on the tour bus today, or I did a studio session today. Like, that's quite easy, because that's almost just like a documenting what you've done. Whereas this the writing that you're doing is includes documenting what you've done, but also includes your deeper thoughts around that, and you have to have a real self-awareness of what you're thinking about in order to write that stuff. So I'm talking about it as being good for you on a personal level, and that therefore being interesting to other people because it's people like arts that's made on a personal level.
It's free therapy for sure. Writing, whether you publish it or not. The saying is, like, you don't know what you think until you write it, and that's totally true in my experience. It's so fun to work through ideas and work through thoughts by writing about them, and by looking at reading your sentences back to yourself and being like, what? No, that doesn't make sense. Wait, how does this make sense? And then answering all sorts of questions for yourself. And similarly, we were talking earlier about how simply by virtue of showing up on a record, things seem more intentional. I think in analog and writing, as for people who might know about you from a different type of work, or might already, like in my case, some people are already interested because they know my dad and they are, interested. So an analog with that is like, it's definitely true that, or I can just know from my own experience as a fan of other artists, it's like what might not be interesting to themselves is very interesting to me as an onlooker or as a fan. And so that can be true too for writing about your own life from someone who has an audience of some sort, some small degree. But that's just something I really don't want to rely on, because I don't know, that's ultimately a pretty flimsy premise for whether a story is interesting or not. It's like, oh, it's just interesting because they know it's coming from you, and they think that's interesting. It's like, you should be able to just take your name off of it and still have and have reading the piece still be an interesting experience for someone.
Yes. No, I understand that. I hadn't really thought about it quite like that before.
Just like as a... Oh, sorry. As a band, the feeling when you go to see a show and it's a band you've never seen before, somebody you really, really like, and the moment they step out on stage, that feeling almost in your chest of like, oh my God, they're actually standing there.
Yeah.
That's a cool feeling. But any good band or any good artist is gonna know that they can't just coast on people feeling that shock of seeing them in the flesh. They got to be able to perform with a curtain up and still create music that is like that is special for those people.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I think that's a really really fair point, an accurate point. One final thought, that this isn't a question or anything. This is just a really cool metaphor that I heard you say that I wanted to put back to you and just sort of see what your thoughts are about. It was about putting art out, and I speak to a lot of people, obviously, who are putting things out, and the way I think of things is with kinetic energy and people vibrating, and then you mentioned a metaphor about a chemistry set and turning up the heat of sort of free-flowing atoms in a beaker, and I just thought that's such an incredible way of thinking about being involved in a creative industry. A reason for putting things out, because so many people attach reasons like, further success or whatever, and it's really just about connecting. And if you put something out into the world, it's not necessarily about the immediate numbers that you get back. It's just about who does that lead you to bump into. As if you're adding an atom to that, or if you're an atom in that beaker and you're turning that heat up a bit, and that allows you to sort of move around a bit more. I just thought that was a really lovely way of thinking about reasons for putting art into the world.
Thanks. Well, you're definitely doing it. That's the way I see shows like this, and opportunities to meet other artists and talk to each other, is is because you're stirring up that pot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for turning that back on me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Cool, man. What a great way to end on that. What's next for you? Are you writing? Are you putting more stuff out soon, or like what's happening next for you?
Playing like 3 or 4 shows this month in Chicago with various friends, groups. My good friend Henry True, who's an amazing singer-songwriter I've played with since we were very little kids, is playing a show in town. I'm drumming with him, and then mostly just playing with Phenome and Waxahatchee until the end of the year, and we're chipping away at new songs in the loft, and recording friend. When I'm home, kind of go into friend mode and try facilitating their projects, and I'll be recording some other friends' singles or EPs, maybe an LP later in the year. But just keeping busy with things like that.
Cool. Well, good luck with it all. I really appreciate you speaking to me.
Thanks, you too, Joe. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to That Recording podcast today. I'll be back next week with more conversation all about analog recording. And for now, don't forget to hit subscribe, and please do share the podcast with friends or anyone else you think is as nerdy about recording as we are. If you'd like to follow me on socials, you can find the podcast on Insta at That Recording Podcast. For my adventures in Ringo nerdery and all things Beatles drums, it's at All You Need Is Drums. And if you're just curious about my work and recording and maybe the odd picture of me having a beer or hanging out with my wife and kids, it's at Joe Montague Drums. And in other exciting news, I have a TikTok. I don't really know what TikTok does or is, but my wife says I need to have it and it's cool, and I should tell you about it. So there we are, follow me on TikTok. Don't be a stranger, and see you next week. Goodbye!